Morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Environmental Improvement Program Committee meeting to order. The date is Wednesday, March 27th, and the time is 9:15, right on time. So the first item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Maria, if you could please call the roll.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Here.
Ms. Faustinos,
Here.
Ms. Hayes,
Here.
Mr. Ferry,
Here.
Mr. Rice, Mr. Settlemeyer, Ms. Williamson.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Maria. I'll now go over the agenda item for the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely, please observe the meeting by going to trpa.gov under the calendar header. Click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for March 27th, 2024. There you will find a link to the public webinar posted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the Raise Hand button at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in function, join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational items only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the committee takes any action. For our remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Also for remote committee members that may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. For members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment and you will be called to the front to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar from a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. And the next item on the agenda now is the approval of minutes. And I'd like to ask staff if there are any changes to the agenda. No? Okay, if there are no changes, then we will deem the agenda approved as posted. And our next item is agenda item 2, approval of the minutes. We have a draft set of minutes from the January 24th, 2024 EIP committee meeting on page 17 of your packets. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? And I'm looking online, don't see anyone speaking up here. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Williamson.
So moved.
I think we had Ms. Williamson step in first. So all those that are in favor of the minutes, please signify that by saying aye.
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 One object? All right, no objections, motion passes. That brings us to agenda item number 3, Environmental Improvement Program Outreach Update and the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act priorities. Information on this item can be found on page 223 of your packet. Since this item is information only, members of the public are welcome to comment at the final public comment period. And I'm going to pass this off to Kat now for her presentation. Thank you.
Next slide. There you go. Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. As mentioned, my name is Kat McIntyre, and I am the Environmental Improvement Program Department Manager here with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And today we're going to present on the Environmental Improvement Program Outreach and Lake Tahoe Restoration Act update. Next slide, please. To give you an overview, I'm going to hand it off to Julie. She's going to talk about the EIP funding model and give you a bit of the background on the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. And then I will present on the priority projects. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Kim Carringer to talk about the recent Washington, D.C. trip regarding Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. So with that, I will pass it over to Julie. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. Julie Reagan here for the record, the TRPA Executive Director. I'm really happy to open this up and to get into a great account of some incredible work that we did as a team, Team Tahoe in Washington. But we just wanted to provide a bit of background. And this is not new information for this committee or the public that's listening, but I wanted to just provide additional context. Particularly as we go into the main agenda of the board and we talk about vehicle miles travel and transportation, because a lot of the discussions really flow all the way back to the creation of the EIP and the approach that we have in this shared responsibility for the lake and the shared funding model to invest in restoration for the lake. So you all have seen the pictures that we usually tell the story of the Environmental Improvement Program and President Clinton coming and Vice President Gore in '97. You know that story, but what really drove that, of course, our delegation, Senator Reid, but TRPA was at the forefront of that. And one of my predecessors, Jim Beachy, who was an incredible leader for this agency, really came up with this concept in partnership with this epic collaboration that we do, saying we don't have the ability through rules on development to achieve our threshold. So much development happened before the first regional plan. We actually have to go back and fix things. And that became his mantra, the project is the fix. And he got the group together, got our partnership together, pulled the states, the federal government, the local governments, tribal government here of the Washoe tribe, the private sector, and said, why don't we do this like a capital improvement program? And we call it the Environmental Improvement Program. And we came up with lists of hundreds and hundreds of projects. And that was really the big story of the empty binder. We had the binder, we hadn't figured out all the projects yet. That came later. But we started this, and here we go 28 years later. Look at how much we've achieved. We're coming up on $3 billion of investment. And in the first 10 years, the goal was roughly 900 million. It was $908 million as a target. And it took us several years to get that going. And it didn't happen overnight. But then fast forward 10 years later, in the first decade of the EIP, we achieved over $1 billion. It was 1.1 billion of investment. And the pie chart that you see are the various sectors. And you can just see, you know, California and the federal government, kind of the peachy pie on the left and the blue on the right are the big lion's share. And the California share is exceptionally large because particularly of the Caltrans investments, you know, 1.1 miles of Highway 50 from Trout Creek to Ski Run Boulevard cost $45 million. And that is a water quality investment. That's a complete streets investment. It's a regional plan investment in walkable Tahoe. So just to give you a picture of some of the scale of funding that we're talking about. And then, of course, the federal government's anchor has always been key to leverage those other shares from the states, the federal governments, and the private sector. And so if you add up all the investment over the 28 years, we're coming up on like $100 million of restoration projects over the decades. And that ebbs and flows. Like I said, in the early years, it was very small. And it wasn't really until the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act was amended to get a consistent, steady flow of funding between 30 and 40 million a year from the federal share that really got in terms of sustainability. That was a key strategy and really a success of the partnership. So I'll take the next slide. So to break it down from the federal share, we wanted to give some context of the work that was done in Washington, D.C. So think about '97, we had that first presidential summit. That took a couple of years then to mobilize the first Restoration Act, and Senator Feinstein was our champion for that, got that passed in 2000. And that was to be the federal share component of the EIP 900 million that we were shooting for. And it took a few years to get appropriations going. The Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act was amended in 2003. And that's when things really got going. And there was a Tahoe set aside for 300 million of federal dollars total. So that was the linchpin and the backbone that other partners like the states of California and Nevada and all the other partners have really used to spur additional investments. So that shared multi-sector approach is really our secret sauce in the recipe of restoration for the lake. And then that act expired. And then we had a lapse. Luckily, we didn't have to stop projects because we had that Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act funding in the pipeline, because these years, the projects go over many years, as Brendan Ferry, who's sitting in at the dais for Brook Lane from El Dorado County, knows. These capital investments usually take a minimum of like 3, sometimes 5 years to do these big projects. So fortunately, we had money in the bank from Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act to get us through until 2016, when we reauthorized the Restoration Act. And then the federal government authorized an additional investment of $415 million over the next 7 years. So the challenge is that even though $415 million got authorized at the federal level at the end of 2016, we've only seen actual appropriations of about $114 million. So there's a lot of headroom left on that authorization. And that is what the group in Washington was very focused on, because we're not asking for more money from the authorization, but we need more time to invest that money. And so we're requesting 10 years for that act to be extended. So it's literally a 1-paragraph bill that Team Tahoe is talking to our delegation, and we're going to talk about the board members that participated in that in the next presentation. But I just wanted to provide that context and the importance of how the power of the partnership, not just public sector, but also private sector contributions that are part of this. And that is our model for success of restoration, and why we are on the national stage on par with the Chesapeake Bay restoration, the Puget Sound, the Everglades, the Great Lakes. Tahoe really has this track record of investment, of wise investments. Everything's transparent through LakeTahoeinfo.org. And that's been a key ingredient, I think, to keep the support at the highest levels in Washington and our states. So with that, I will turn it back over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'm going to highlight some of the enduring power of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. So these numbers that you're seeing are since 2016. And we'll start with Forest Health. Since 2016, 37 projects have been completed and 21,000 acres have been treated. And we saw the importance of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act and these treatments during the Caldor fire. Recent research has shown that, in fact, those treatments that were done in that footprint did impact wildfire behavior and gave firefighters and first responders an opportunity to actually directly go against the fire, directly fight the fire. In terms of water infrastructure to fight fire, 7 projects have been accelerated by LTRA, and more than 100 have been implemented by local water districts. And these projects are really to upgrade the region's aging and undersized infrastructure to ensure water is available for crews if and when fire strikes. So again, these were critical during the Caldor fire. Next slide, please. Again, this is since 2016. When we talk about water quality, 39 projects have been completed and more than 500,000 pounds of fine sediment and pollution have been prevented from annually flowing into Lake Tahoe. We just heard about one of these types of tools and projects during the ops committee with the road sweeper machines that clean up all that fine sediment and stop it from getting into the lake and affecting clarity. In terms of the aquatic invasive species program, 15 projects have been completed, 51,000 boats have been inspected, and 271 acres of aquatic invasive species have been treated. The Lake Tahoe Restoration Act is the cornerstone of the AIS control program, and through this funding, substantial progress has been made to address one of the largest infestations in the lake, the Tahoe Keys. And then lastly, with watershed restoration, 17 projects have been completed and 342 acres of wetland have been restored. Again, the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act has allowed implementers to initiate some of the largest restoration projects to date, including the Taylor-Talac Marsh and Ecosystem Restoration Project, the Meeks Bay Restoration Project, and the Upper Truckee River Marsh Restoration Project. I do want to note there are 2 other kind of categories or topic areas: Lahan cutthroat trout and accountability. These are eligible for Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding. However, historically, they have gone unfunded through Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. Next slide, please. There are also community benefits that come from the Environmental Improvement Program and Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding. And so the EIP supports an average of 1,700 jobs a year. Every $1 million in EIP spending generates an additional 1.6 million in economic output. So we're not just talking about restoration benefits, we're also talking about community, economic, and social benefits related to this program. Next slide, please. And going back to kind of what Julie was saying, this is all about leveraging. So the LTRA appropriations act as that backbone funding. So the investment of 114 million in Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding since 2016 has been able to catalyze over an additional 500 million in state, local, and private matching funds. So we're able to see the funding stack upon each other. The federal funding really acts as that catalyst to bring in the additional dollars from other sectors. Next slide, please.
I've gotten frozen. So shocked that we've accomplished. so
Yeah.
much.
Sorry.
It's a really great slide too.
Should I just keep going?
What's on the next one?
I get into the priorities for each category.
Yeah.
I can speak to them if that's. Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just speak to them. Okay, so you'll see in the next slides when they get moving again. I highlight some of the upcoming priorities for the different resource areas. So in terms of forest health, we have, you'll see when you see the slide, or if you see the slide, the majority of projects that are really being prioritized for the coming years focus on two key areas in the Forest Action Plan, and that is the guiding document for the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team over 10 years. So the two key priority areas are around capacity building and innovation and technology. So some of the priority projects include a pilot project with the BurnBot, which is a new technology that uses robots to do mastication and burning on small scales. So we're going to be piloting a project with the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team around that. A Trex training, so that is a prescribed burning training, specifically being, oh, there we go. We got them on two screens. A Trex training that's going to be set up with the Washoe tribe and University of Nevada, Reno. This is to build capacity for cultural burning and prescribed burning in the Tahoe Basin. And then we also have traditional projects. So the middle picture is the Washoe Meadows, California State Park and Lake Valley Resource Responsibility Area, planning to do fuels reduction and hazard mitigation in that area. So all of those are priorities for the forest health teams coming up in the next few years. Next slide, please. In terms of AIS priorities, you'll see on the left the Tahoe Keys. We are in the third year of the control methods test, and already the teams and participants and stakeholders are thinking about how we use all of these years of data to inform long-term planning for that area. So that is on our radar and on the horizon. The middle slide represents the AIS program's surveillance and rapid response. So this effort is to maintain weed-free status of previously treated and controlled areas. And ultimately, this is the direction the AIS program wants to go. As they are more and more successful, as we control more and more areas, it will be important just to keep doing surveillance and rapid response in those areas. And then the last one is, you'll see the tiny V on the right, that is a bubble curtain. And so the AIS team is actively looking at how we do efficacy monitoring for bubble curtains, because bubble curtains are one of the most important methods of containment. When we talk about containing a population, that is one of the most important methods. So we want to understand how efficacious that methodology truly is. Next slide, please. In terms of watersheds and water quality, multiple priorities are coming up in the next 1 to 2 years. We've got Burke Creek and Ray Meadow restoration. That's the upper left corner. This is to restore wetland habitat and improve trail conditions to increase hydrological connectivity in the meadow. The upper right picture is the Upper Truckee marsh and river ecosystem. That is an enormous watershed. And so there's additional phases of restoration work that will be occurring in that area. And then the bottom is a rendering of the Tahoe Valley Stormwater and Greenbelt Improvement Project. This is a multi-benefit stormwater, SEZ, bike and pedestrian improvement and recreational amenities project. This centers around the Y in South Lake Tahoe. Next slide, please. And then lastly, in terms of Lahan cutthroat trout, again, I mentioned this is an unfunded area historically in terms of Lake Tahoe Restoration Act funding. The priorities for the this species and the team that's working on it have stayed the same from the previous year. This fish is critically important to the Washoe tribe of Nevada and California, and they're actively involved in all of the elements. The key projects that they want to move forward include reintroduction and performance evaluation of Lahan cutthroat trout, tributary assessments, and an overall species recovery and habitat restoration program of work. Next slide, please. So with that, I will hand it to Kim Carringer to talk about the Washington, D.C. trip.
Thank you, Kat. Kim Carringer for the record. It's really exciting to hear all of that progress that we've been making thanks to LTRA and all the partnership commitments that come to match it. And that is exactly what our message was when we brought this coalition to DC, was to educate our reps in Congress about all the great work that we're doing here in DC, or in Tahoe, I'm sorry, and how important and critical that funding source is. You see the different representatives we have in that picture. We had 22 different representatives go this year. We had Chairman Smokey from the Washoe tribe, many of our local elected officials that are also TRPA board members here, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Tahoe Fund, the Lake Tahoe Community College, Barton, TTD, and some of our PUDs that implement a lot of the water infrastructure projects. We really wanted to show to the congressional delegation that we're a united front on public, private, across all sectors on the need for LTRA and what's at stake if we don't have it extended. If it's not extended, you could see a reduction in a lot of the work that Kat talked about. You know, the critical work we're doing on forest restoration. LTRA is such an anchor on that, to continue work on that. Our local jurisdictions really need to continue the funding to meet our lake clarity goals and implement the TMDL and do all of the watershed restoration work. And we don't want to see delays or cancellations in some of these larger projects that we've got momentum on and are going right now. And we could see setbacks and delays if we don't continue the momentum that we've got built right now. So that was really our message in DC. And I'm excited a lot of the board members that attended the trip are here. And we're going to talk a little bit about in that discussion of just your takeaways of what you took from the trip and our messaging there and how we can continue to support the EIP funding model in general and the LTRA extension going forward. So I think that's it for this. Go into the discussion.
Yep. Next slide.
Excellent. So I'll hand it back to you, Belinda, for the discussion questions.
Great. Well, thank you, staff, for that really informative presentation. I think I'm always astounded at how much has been completed over the years. And it's a great reminder of, you know, tying this all back to our threshold requirements, how, you know, we're achieving goals through the implementation of projects. And I just, you know, want to say that I admire the work of the team here in Tahoe so much. I wish we could take this and put it in LA. Regional collaboration is a really tough thing to do. And I think the history of the collaboration that we have here on project implementation is just so astounding. And I just want to commend all of our partners on that issue. I think it's really amazing. So I want to open it up now for comments from any of the committee members. And we'll take comments first here in the room, and then I'll call on people online. Comments, questions? No? Okay, online, do we have anyone? Okay, Ashley, I see your hands raised.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I just had a question about the how you're sort of accounting for the other benefits of the money spent, because I think it's really helpful if you can show not only the acres treated, but also all the other benefits that accrue as a result of those expenditures. And just wondering what you're doing to demonstrate that so that we can get this extended appropriation, kind of pointing out all of these benefits to everyone around the lake and beyond the lake as well, considering the number of visitors that come to Tahoe every year.
Okay, staff.
Okay, Kim Carringer, for the record, I will start and then I might hand it to Kat on forest restoration as far as tracking benefits. But one of the great things we do have about the EIP is we have that shared set of performance measures. So everyone that's implementing project or tracking it similarly. We have about 30 set that we all approve together so we can all track that. So acres treated, we have also habitat protected or habitat restored. We have watershed restoration restored, and we have ways to track projects that have multi-benefits across different ways of those performance measures. As far as forest restoration on benefits, I don't know if you want to talk more about how we track it with outside of the performance measures.
Sure.
I want to make sure I understand your question, Ashley. Outside,
I'm just thinking about really showing when you go on these lobbying meetings and we are really trying to demonstrate to the state why it's really important that these dollars come to Tahoe, if you're able to show that, the money may be spent here, but it's providing all of these benefits, for example, jobs, access, recreational benefits, clean water, downstream clean water, overall watershed improvement, reduced smoke, drifting out of the basin, that type of thing. Just that it's not just about the acres treated right here, but this is important for both states as well.
Thank you, Member Conrad Seda, for the question. I'm going to jump in, Julie Reagan, TRPA Director, and then I think Kat wants to round this out. I want to underscore the question because as Member Ferry knows, in the early years of the Environmental Improvement Program, just to arrive at a common set of performance measures was a major issue. And Kim is right, we have like 33 common performance measures. We used to call them MOPS, right? Measures of performance. We've changed that into performance measures. But to have 80 organizations agree of how they categorize the work, for example, acres treated, that sounds pretty straightforward, but how do you count first entry versus re-entry in the forest? And, getting agreement of the Forest Service with CAL FIRE, with the Nevada Division of Forestry, with local fire districts. That was years in the making. So I appreciate the question because sometimes now we're a well-oiled machine as a partnership and we take it for granted, but that was very tough work. We had a lot of brain power. We had a lot of consultants that helped us do it. Folks that have worked all around the world doing this kind of really looking at what our overall ecosystem benefits. And I think there's still work to do, Ashley, on that to take it into the new level of resilience and evolving from just simply acres treated to what are those multi-benefits? What are the cross-sector benefits in terms of resilience? And we've got some exciting work underway. And then how do we link that back to TRPA's thresholds? And I appreciate the chair mentioning our environmental thresholds because this whole program started as a capital investment strategy to achieve the regional plan's environmental threshold goals. And then how do we link that back to lake clarity, to air quality, to all those other benefits in the recreation space? We have a recreation standard as well for thresholds. So that work is ongoing, but I would say I would hold up our work with any of the great restoration programs, whether it's the Chesapeake Bay, they do something called the Bay Barometer. The Puget Sound in Washington has a really impressive suite. Our staff have gone up to some of those different areas to see how they do it. We had the Science Council evaluate some of that work as part of their work to make sure that we are using the best available science to guide us, but a little bit of a bigger picture answer. And then maybe Kat, you want to give some examples of how we're evolving the forest health piece.
Sure, thank you. Kat McIntyre for the record. This is something that came up quite frequently when we had our recent Tahoe Fire and Fuels Team retreat was what additional data do we need to tell our stories? So we've got the performance measures, but how else can we look at the data or what else do we need to be gathering to tell the story of the work that's getting done? And so there's a lot of really interesting, we work with our GIS team around different data points or how we can apply different concepts, whether it's like fire risk. Can we look at risk reduction across a landscape because of our treatments and model that? So we're working with the GIS team to understand what data is available and how we can model things to understand our treatments being effective. And then One of the points that I made earlier in the presentation was we just had a recent scientific study done on the Caldor fire, looking at were treatments effective in modifying wildfire behavior on the Caldor fire. And we found that yes, they are, but there's constant engagement with the Tahoe Science Advisory Council and regional scientists to understand how do we show all of these performance measures are in fact making the impacts that we want to see. So.
And then I'll just add, Madam Chair, we'd be happy to send around those performance measures, the 33 that the committee can see. We'll upload that to the page on the website for this committee so that the public can see that as well. And then we can dive a little bit deeper, Ashley, in terms of multiple benefits with the economic study that we did about jobs and the multiplier effect. We'd be happy to do that offline.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I just think it would be great to have some succinct bullets when you go into all those congressionals to just point out all the benefits accruing, not just immediately around the lake, but everywhere else in both states. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I now see a hand raised by Ms. Gustafson.
Good morning, everyone. And I had the benefit of going back to DC with the team, and I just wanted to share a few takeaways from that. First off, what a tremendous job our staff and the League to Save Lake Tahoe staff did, and the committee organizing our visits. To have 22 people trying to coordinate schedules and get into all the offices was yeoman's work, and actually I think it went really, really well as far as the coordination and the timing and everybody getting a role to play that had made the trip out there. And when you look at 22 individuals representing public, private, tribal, science, nonprofits, we had federal and state representatives, obviously the agencies, and being on message with the importance of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act as a vehicle, that we then need to fight for funding and appropriations through that. But getting that renewal was on point for our messaging to all those. Now, there's no doubt when you start talking about issues impacting Tahoe, legislative folks start asking other questions, and some of the areas not covered under LTRA, including one that we'll be talking about later, transportation, are key to looking at additional funds and how we collaborate in the same manner to come forward with a consistent message. And it may take us years, just like the EIP. It takes a few years to get the funding rolling, identify those sources, find the legislative fix, and especially in tough budget times with a state or federal government priorities, and to meld those into the priorities that we might have. So I thought the collaboration was outstanding. The effort was allows also on those trips allows for a lot of discussion on the side between committee members to understand better their perspectives on solutions, and the significance of working together can never be taken away. There's not enough collaboration in our state, nation, world. And when people see all those interests sharing the energy and effort made to take the time to get back to DC and to discuss it, I think we can't say enough about that. And I want to thank staff again for your efforts, your scripts, your coordination of us all, because it's not easy having organized events in my life. I know it's hard to keep everybody on track and on time, and you did an outstanding job. And I think this model of what is included in the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, but then how we further that with the EIP funding for the other categories is critical, so that we're on the same page, what we're all working for, and we will be successful, not always on the first year, but in years to come. So I really appreciate it and wanted to share that with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised now by Ms. Leamer.
Hi, thanks. It's been nice to just listen into this committee and hear the updates from DC. I'm just curious what the next steps are in the legislative process to get this across the finish line.
Great. Okay, Julie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Loomer, for the question. Julie Reagan, TRPA Director. Great question. So what we were discussing with some of the key staffers that are leading the effort to get this done. Senator Cortez Masto's office is, of course, our whole delegation is on board as co-sponsors, but they are in the driver's seat to make this happen. And the one thing I'm sure others that were moved by this as I was in the room, Senator Cortez Masto told our group directly, we are getting this done this year. And so they don't make that pledge lightly at the member level. And it took all of us, I think we caught our breath a little to say, okay, hooray. There are several vehicles that we could hitch a ride. This is not a standalone bill. One of the vehicles that we've talked about, and if you go back to 2016, we were folded into what's called the WRDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act, which is mostly Army Corps investments. And it was the Water Infrastructure for the Nation Act, the WIN Act at the time. Right now, that is in process. We had a committee jurisdictional issue with going through natural energy and natural resources versus environment and public works. But we've met with Senator Tom Carper is the chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee, which would be the WRDA bill. And we met with him and with his staff, and they're very open to folding us in at the right time if the conditions allow to do that in the Congress. But there are also some lands bills that we're looking at and a number of there's something called the Weather Act through Commerce and NOAA. We've got about 4 or 5 different vehicles identified. And, Congress is always unpredictable, but we're in our last year of appropriations, and we don't have money in the pipeline from the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act anymore. Those dollars are done. The Tahoe set aside has been expended. So we're in a different place than we were when the act lapsed last go round. As Kim said earlier in the presentation, we could have dire consequences if we have a lapse in appropriations. So we, as a partnership, and I really want to thank Chair Gustafson for her leadership in this, we were on message to drive that home, and I think they heard it loud and clear. So we're going to keep working with our team in DC and with all the partners to look at any possible vehicle for this to be folded into this year.
Thank you, Julie. So I think that, for purposes of trying to get this discussion to a place where we can move on to the next meeting of the governing board, is that I think if staff could keep the committee informed as to when these critical next steps are going to take place. Clearly, getting wrapped up into other bills and coming before the committee is always challenging to know ahead of time, but to the extent that any of us could be helpful in that process. I think we'd love to hear from staff on that. And I don't know if any other committee members have ideas on how they'd like to be involved, but I'm sure if you reached out to staff directly, they would be able to help with that. So the other thoughts, just real briefly, that I wanted to add is that, of course, both in Nevada and California, there are other opportunities to continue to seek support for the EIP program. And I just want to flag that issue, at least on the California side. I'm familiar with, we're hoping that there might be a climate bond next year. Obviously, this has been kind of in the works now for several years. And who knows if it's going to move forward, but I think it's important for those of us that have the ability to, keep up the discussion of how important it is that if there is any funding mechanism that is put forward at our, in our different state appropriations process or bond process, that we keep the profile high in acknowledging that, Tahoe is an important component of all of those discussions. So I would then maybe just offer one last opportunity for other committee members to chime in here.
Well, so I'm not on the committee, but I will speak. I was on the DC trip, and it was really eye-opening for me to see. I go to DC every year on a completely different issue, which we have a lot of opposition generally. So it was really cool to see, honestly, how unique Tahoe is and how recognized we are to need the protection, but also the importance that it is to be present and to let people know. One of the greatest things I thought was our Congressman Kevin Kiley which is, you know, recently a new congressman, really in support of this, which is a big transition from the previous congressman we had in that office. So he came to our press conference, and so that was a great change to see. And I think all in all, the trip was a great success, and just really great to see it. The first day I was there, the National League of Cities was meeting, and I was seeing them through the halls of Congress the whole week. And just to kind of see what they're trying to push as, you know, a major organization representing all cities, and then us as 22 people, really kind of, yeah, we're very unique, and it's great to see. And yeah, we just need to keep up the good work. So glad to be a part of it.
Okay, if I'm not seeing any additional comments, I don't see anyone else online. I think that, you know, staff will take this information, feedback back, and I'm hoping that we can keep a regular meeting schedule for the EIP program. So I look forward to that, and there'll be further discussion on upcoming topics. So moving on then, so agenda item 4 is upcoming topics, and this, since this item is informational only, members of the public are welcome to comment at the final public comment item. And Kim, I believe you're going to take this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kim Carringer for the record. So for upcoming items, we have generally every other month schedule planned for the rest of the year. We know we want to do a tour. And right now we have it scheduled as a virtual project tour, but we're still working if it's possibility to do some on the ground. It's weather dependent. One option with the virtual tour is we have our GIS team on board, and we can see a lot of projects in a short amount of time. So we have them working on a visual of what projects are underway or planned around the basins. We want to bring that to the committee, and with potentially with a board or committee outside field tour. We're still working on logistics for that. In July, we do want to bring the work that we're doing as part of our strategic priority on the cutting the green tape and restoration through permitting that we're doing here at TRPA. So there's a lot of great work we're doing to make sure we're improving processes and how we get permits through for projects that are beneficial to the environment. As you know, a lot of these projects require multiple permits from multiple agencies, and we have a multi-sector group working on how we can make sure those get through the process efficiently. So we want to give you an update on that and maybe get your input on ways we can continue to improve it through our own permitting process, and how we can see restoration come through the development projects that come through TRPA. So that'll be the focus in the summer. We have some placeholders in the fall for the threshold evaluation that is scheduled to come out this year. And just like Madam Chair, you brought up earlier, all of our EIP work is grounded in our threshold. So we'll be seeing where we're at. We do that check every 4 years of what progress we're making on the long term and how we direct our priorities and our work to implement and achieve those thresholds. So we have some placeholders there for when the threshold evaluation comes out. So that's it. Go ahead, Julie.
And then if I can just round out, thank you, Kim, and thank you, Madam Chair. Great discussion. I just wanted to especially thank the board members who supported us in this, and Mayor Bass, Chair Gustafson, Member Hill, Alexis Hill, and our presidential appointee, Megan Hayes. Having the 4 members that we could split up in the different groups, I think was especially important because we had such a large, diverse group. It was nice to get the flavor of that filtered through our governing board. So really appreciate everyone who took the time to go. And I did want to let the public know, I handed out the Enduring Power of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, a glossy. That was our leave behind in Washington, and it is uploaded on the EIP committee section of the meetings page of the website. So the public can take a look at that if they're online virtually, and we have hard copies available for the public in the room as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any committee members have comments on this item? Don't see any online either. No,
Just
everyone? Okay.
fantastic job on this leave behind. I know it was tough to pull all this together. Usually you do something like this for the summit, and this is incredible work, and now you're in good shape for the summit. So I will make this available at my county just to spread the good word, and hopefully our $72 million submittal for LTRA FY25 comes through at 72 million appropriated. Would be great for the last year. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, that was an informational item only. So now we will move on to agenda item number 5, final committee member comments. Okay, nothing online either. Sure.
I just have the benefit, I'm here for Supervisor Lane, obviously, but I do have the good benefit of, working up and down the EIP chain, if you will, down to the staff level, and how these projects get thought about, how they get funded and implemented, permitted, et cetera. Also working with the TIE Steering Committee and the Environmental Improvement Coordinating Committee, lots of acronyms. But there is so much, like you said, Chair, it's great to see how much actually gets done, and there is so much hard work happening up and down the chain continually, coordinating on these projects. And, just applause to Kat and Kim and staff for coordinating the locals, and for continuous all marching forward on the EIP, which is the CIP in Lake Tahoe. We do have a big CIP program on the west slope of our county, but in Tahoe, really, it is the EIP, and it's just really cool how unique that is in Tahoe. I feel fortunate to get to work on that, and we will, again, be delivering a few EIP projects this summer, including the Pioneer Trail Roundabout on US Highway 50 in Myers, and a complete street project on Apache Avenue down to the Magnet School, among other things. The environmental document for the next phase of the Greenway is out on the street now, so we would welcome comments on that. But despite the uncertainty of the LTRA reauthorization, although we all have our fingers crossed, I know the local governments continue to march forward to implement EIP projects, and it's a big part of our duties here. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. I'm seeing none. Our final matter of business is the general public interest comment period. If any member of the public wishes to address the Environmental Improvement Program Committee at this time, please raise your hand or step up to the podium. And those who may be online, you can click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by TRPA staff members. So welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Darcy Collins with the League to Save Lake Tahoe, and I'm also the co-chair with Devin Middlebrook for the Communications and Funding EIP Committee. And I want to echo the comments made today, especially from Ms. Reagan, Ms. Carringer, Supervisor Gustafson, and Mayor Bass on how successful our trip to DC was. I don't need to reiterate everything that they said, but just wanted to add a bit of color to those comments and some next steps. It was such a great trip for so many reasons. I think the biggest reason was just the amount of diversity and stakeholders that participated on behalf of Team Tahoe. It was a lot of time and effort to get all the way across the country, and I'm very appreciative of everyone coming out there, as well as all the staff time from TRPA and my team for helping organize everything. It was, as Supervisor Gustafson said, a feat, definitely a puzzle to put together, but it ended up being very productive. And it was especially noticeable because we're meeting, and Mayor Bass mentioned this, we're meeting at a time when there's other interests competing for time with our elected officials. But Tahoe comes as a collaborative group and all asking and looking for the same outcome. And that's not necessarily the case with other contingencies. And we're also very bipartisan. All of our delegates have supported our effort. And we're really looking forward to the extension of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. But as Supervisor Gustafson said, the Restoration Act doesn't include all of the needs for the Environmental Improvement Program. So we do have next steps. Once we get that extension across the finish line, then we're going to look to other opportunities to look for funding, federal, state, local, for the gaps in our Environmental Improvement Program. And as many of you know, the League to Save Lake Tahoe has been a staunch supporter of the Restoration Act since the first round. And we look forward to continuing to support these efforts, improving our messaging. So when we do go back to DC and other venues, we can really talk about the impact of what our investment has made and where we need to continue that investment. So thank you to everyone who joined, and I look forward to the next trip.
Thank you very much. Any additional members in the audience wanting to make comments? All right, Catherine, is there anyone online that wishes to comment?
Madam Chair, we just have one hand raised online. Miss Ellie Waller, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Good morning, Ellie Waller. I want to thank everybody for the presentations today, the update on the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. Anything that was put online is appreciative from the public. Could you also list the 22-member team so everybody in the public knows who is representing the Lake Tahoe Basin? That would be greatly appreciated. And is there a tentative date that you can share for the upcoming summit? Thank you.
No date. Okay, great. Staff is informing me, Ellie, that there is no date yet set for the summit. And I'm sure that once that date is set, there will be broad distribution of that information to all our interested parties. All right, if there are no more comments, I think we're going to move on to the adjournment of this meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, so the meeting is adjourned at 10:05.